Okay, welcome to lesson 2. So in lesson 1, we started to understand that we're something greater than the mind. We can actually take a step back from mind and observe what we're saying to ourselves on a daily basis. This is important because what we hold in mind tends to manifest. And up until you taking this course, you were pretty much unaware of what was going on in your mind at all times. And so now that we are beginning to observe the mind, we're learning how to step back from the mind and just notice what we're thinking. We're just observing our thoughts. Now that we're doing it with that one behavior in mind, we're going to start to understand why these thoughts are creating the behavior that is no longer serving this. And we're going to do this with a tool called a transformation ladder. Now, this is not a new concept, but there's this guy, Masson Kipp, he wrote this book, Claim Your Power. And he kind of like have coined this thing and he trademarked it. And it's, I don't agree with everything that Masson Kipp is doing, but this transformation ladder is like an amazing tool because it really gets to this understanding of why no one is actually creating any real change. So in this video, if you actually go through this process, you are going to be ahead of like 95% of the population in understanding why we actually don't change. And once you understand why we don't change and learn what it actually takes to change, you're just going to be so much further ahead than everybody else because it is in the behaviors that the mind has created to protect us that we are blocked to reaching our maximum potential. So the whole idea of spiritual growth is to continue to remove those blocks so that those limitations no longer prevent us from achieving new states of consciousness. So this is what the transformation ladder looks like. It's just this triangle, all right? And in this triangle, there's 5 stages, okay? So at the very top of this thing, and you might want to make notes of this, you're going to have a behavior. So whatever the behavior is you picked out in lesson 1, you're going to put that behavior down in here. So let's just say, for example, I'm just trying to think of it. It's a good idea to do an example. Let's just say, for example, you have the behavior of people pleasing. Yeah, we'll use my old one, right? So I would write in here, people pleasing, okay? And so then underneath that behavior are thoughts, okay? So we've all heard the saying, your thoughts create your reality. And so everyone has gone to work to try and install like positive thinking, right? But the problem is that, as I mentioned in video 1, we have 20 to 70,000 subconscious thoughts every single day. So if you try and go to war with 20 to 70,000 subconscious thoughts with your 100, or probably not even that many, 10 conscious thoughts every single day, you're just fighting a losing battle. And this is why no one actually changes their thoughts, because you can't do it with positive thinking. This is why positive thinking doesn't work. So the whole entire world is focused on the top half of this triangle, which is if you change your thoughts, you can change your reality. But the real question is what's creating the thoughts, right? And so if you can start to understand what is creating your thoughts, why you're endlessly thinking about, for example, like me, making money, or when I was a people pleaser, the thoughts that might have been associated with people pleaser is don't want conflict, right? Want people to like me, right? Won't be accepted, right? Whatever that may be, okay? So you're just going to write out all of the thoughts that are associated with people pleasing. And so if you just try and start changing those thoughts, you're fighting a losing battle. So the real question is, well, where do the thoughts come from? Well, this is where things start to get really interesting. So underneath the thoughts is a belief system, right? And interestingly enough, the acronym for belief system is BS, because it's true. It's a lie that you've told yourself to protect yourself from some sort of emotional pain. So the belief system I had here is, for me, if I don't agree, this is a rhyme also, they won't like me, right? So that was the belief I created. I believed that I had to be an agreeing person, because if I wasn't an agreeing person, it was going to create confrontation. It was going to create rejection, lack of acceptance. So I had to be agreeable, right? And that was the belief system that was created. That belief system protected me from some sort of emotion, right? And so in my example here, I got really deep on this one. And my emotion was fear. It was fear of actual physical confrontation, right? And so I believed that if I wasn't agreeable, it would lead to physical confrontation where I would experience fear, panic, all of this type of thing. And so this belief system is driving these thoughts. This emotion was the creation of that belief system, right? And so then the last step is to identify our original incident. It's like, where did this begin? Where did I begin being so fearful of confrontation? And for me, it was the welding tank incident, right? And so what happened with me in the welding tank incident was when I was a kid, my dad was like always working on cars in the garage. He had these welding tanks. I was swinging on the hoses of the welding tanks. They disconnected from the wall, landed on top of me. I was pinned under there for like 30 minutes. And this is where I established claustrophobia. And so then later on in life, if I was wrestling with my brother, like I was about 7 or so when this happened, when I was wrestling with my brother and he would pin me down, I would have a panic attack, right? That state of panic as a 7-year-old kid, when you were in a panic attack, you think you're going to die, right? And the ego is only function is to keep us alive. That's why the ego exists, is to keep us alive, okay? And so when it perceives potential death, and the interesting thing about the ego is that the ego perceives all emotional pain as potential death, okay? And so when the ego perceived this potential death, it immediately went to work to the don't create confrontation, make sure everybody likes you, right? And so then I had endless thoughts while I was in conversations about making sure that I didn't piss people off, making sure I liked people, making sure people liked me, making sure I was agreeable. That led to this behavior of people pleasing, right? And so now, in order to create real change, what I want to do is I want to process this fear-based emotion. I want to be able to sit in that fear long enough so that it goes away for good, right? And what we're doing here in lesson 3, I'm going to teach you the actual process of letting go of these emotions that have been trapped inside of you forever and are the reason why we are creating these limiting behaviors that are not serving us, okay? And so when we learn how to feel these emotions and connect to them, these emotions are essentially the nuclear power plant that is creating thoughts. And those thoughts are creating our reality. So when we learn to be okay, for me, it was actually learning how to be okay in confined spaces. It was learning how to be in the fear of being in a confined space, breathing through it, connecting fully to how I was feeling in the body, breathing through that emotion, and then saying, hey, I can handle this. I'm okay here. The interesting thing about all emotions is that they are a mile wide and an inch deep, meaning the mind has made them up to be like this lake that is so long and so deep that you could never swim across it. And in fact, if you went into it, you would drown. But when we finally have the courage, right? And this is why on the scale of consciousness, courage is so important. When we finally have the courage to say, I'm actually going to get in the lake. I'm going to feel what it feels like to be in the water. When we finally have the courage to take that step, right? What happens is we recognize that the lake is only an inch deep. It was only the perception of the mind that this lake was like this super deep lake that we can never get across. So when we realize it's only an inch deep, we recognize that we can walk right across it. And when we walk right across it, we are no longer fearful. Guess what? The belief system shuts down. We no longer need to be liked by everyone so that we don't feel the fear of confrontation, because we've sat in the fear of confrontation and we're okay with it. That also shuts off the thoughts, which eliminates the behavior of people pleasing. This is how we create real change. 99% of the world is focused on the top half of this triangle. Change your thoughts, you change your reality, right? You have a behavior, let's give you some drugs to try and get out of it. But the real change begins when we begin to understand what was driving all of those thoughts in the beginning. What is the emotion that we're trying to avoid? where was that emotion first experienced in our lives? And this is how we begin to create real change, by understanding what our behavior is connected to. And this is all connected to this little acronym that I created, which is CCRR, which is catch, connect, recontextualize, and release. What we're focused on for lesson 2 today is just these first 3 steps. And in lesson 3, we're going to go into the release portion, which is actual letting go of these emotions. So in lesson 1, you already did the catch. You started to notice thought around certain behaviors. Now, with the transformation ladder, we can connect it to a belief system, and we can connect it to an emotion that we're avoiding. We can also recontextualize that. We can recognize that, hey, we're just avoiding the fear of physical confrontation. Can I handle physical confrontation? Yeah, I can handle it. Okay, great. So you already start taking back power from it. If the behavior continues to show up, we have to move into release, which is the letting go of that emotion, learning how to connect fully to an emotion so that it no longer has power over us. The example I always give here, and then we're going to move into the lesson, is if someone's fearful of heights, all we have to do is get them to get to a place of courage where they can step onto a ladder. When they step onto that ladder, the fear is going to overtake them. It's going to create tightness in the chest, shortness of the breath, weaken the knees. And if we just say to them, just stay here, just stay with that emotion. Don't try and escape it. Don't try to avoid it. Don't try to rationalize it or judge it. Just stay here in it. Eventually, that emotion is going to run its course. And then they can take another step, and the emotion might come back up again, and they stay with it again. But eventually, they're going to be able to climb all the way to the top of that ladder, and they're going to be completely fine. Now, all of the thoughts that they've had throughout the course of their lives about avoiding heights get turned off. And when they get turned off, we are free for good. And this is the process of real change. So in lesson 3, we're going to move into actually letting go. But what I want you to do is I want you to get out a pen and paper, and I want you to go through your own transformation ladder. Don't get too wrapped up on this original incident. So many people think, I don't really know where it began in my life. Whatever incident comes up to you when you connect to the fear of physical confrontation, maybe the first thing that came up to me would be like a fight that I was once in and lost, maybe. But that, whatever comes up first, is where you are being guided to heal first. As you heal from what you're aware of, what you are unaware of will begin coming to the surface, right? And so the emotions that we've repressed, that we shoved down so deep, are actually the emotions that are really creating behaviors that are limiting us most. But in order to bring them to the surface, we have to start dealing with the stuff that we are conscious of. So don't worry too much about like trying to get back to 3 years old or 4 years old. Whatever comes into your awareness, make that your original incident for now, and begin connecting to that pain. Instead of trying to run away from that pain, we are actually going to run towards it. This is how we create lasting change. So draw out a triangle, start with a behavior. When you get to thoughts, you're listing out all of the thoughts, which you kind of did in lesson 1 already, so you kind of already have them. Then you want to start connecting it to a belief system and recognize that the belief system is a protection from pain. So what belief system did you create to protect yourself from an emotion? What emotion were you protecting yourself from? And when was the first time you can remember experiencing that emotional pain? This is the process of real change. Let's go on to lesson 3, where we actually learn how to let go of this thing.